Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Episode 2, Season 1 of the Dozer Tactical Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Mendoza, and thanks for tuning in. I'm joined today by a lifelong friend who's been with me through thick and thin. Please give it up for Mr. Eddie Moreida. Eddie is an adventure enthusiast who takes life head on and continues to pursue some of life's greatest challenges. Eddie, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Dan. Also, thank you for the warm welcome there. For this podcast, we talk about recent news articles, first-hand experiences, preparedness tips, and tactics for everyday disasters and emergencies. Any articles, gear, and training courses discussed in this episode will be provided with links in the description.
Also, please leave us a review and let others know what your thoughts were about this podcast. Consider supporting the podcast by clicking on the support link in the show description.
So, Dan, what are we talking about today?
Well, Eddie, today our topic of conversation is all about adventure. We'll be making sure that our listeners are prepared for the most common problems while out exploring. We will also go over creating an adventure kit, discussing some basics about common tools and gear that should be carried with you while you're exploring, and how to prepare for common injuries and covering some of the basics of first aid while you're out and about. Now, Eddie, you're one of the most adventurous people I know. Let's talk a little bit about you and some of your awesome adventures.
Well, first of all, thank you. One that comes to mind is definitely back in around June of 2013. I was at the beach with my little sister, and typically we have the spot that we usually go to. It's next to the pier. We're on the right-hand side of it. We choose that spot just because it's easy. We have a location to look to at land where we usually put our things. That helps us to keep a good distance of about 50 meters from the pier. And then we look over to the pier to gauge how far into the ocean we are. Now, on this particular day, we'd already been out there for about an hour, boogie boarding and such. But then this younger kid, he was, I'm guessing, about 12 years old, came up as well. He started doing the same, a little bit closer to the pier. An important thing to note here, for those of you guys that don't know, is that when you're out in the ocean, especially if you're near something like a pier, any kind of pillars, anything like that, you have to definitely create some distance there, because as the waves come in and crash on that object or those objects, it can create kind of a vacuum and keep you down, as well as it just make a current where it's difficult to get out. And I don't think this kid realized that. Luckily, he had his sister with him. She looked to be about my age at the time. So we're talking about 18 years old. Now, I saw them coming. I saw them doing their thing. They seemed to be all right. But I try to keep an eye out just in case. And eventually, what I was worried about happening did unfortunately happen. My sister was actually the one that noticed it first. She pointed me over in their direction, and that young lady was actually screaming and floundering, yelling that he's drowning, he's drowning. And so this next part, I wish I could remember more vividly, but I think I was just in go mode at that time. I essentially told my sister to wait there. I swam over as fast as I could to where the girl was pointing towards. I saw the little kid floundering. He's trying to come up for air. He's freaking out. And the more you're hyperventilating and just losing control in that situation, the more you're going to unfortunately inhale water. And so this kid was going down and was struggling to get any air, trying to get back up to the surface. So I dive in there, I grab him by I think it was his arm, wrap my arm around him, and then pull him back. Fortunately, there were lifeguards on duty at this time. They were already on the way to help this kid out, so I essentially just grab him, pull him up. I'm pulling him towards shore. I see the lifeguards coming up towards us as well. They were able to take over, which I'm thankful for, because at that time I had very minimal. I don't think I had any formal first aid training. I knew how to do CPR, but I'm glad that they were there to take over at that point. They were able to give this kid CPR. He was okay. So I'm very thankful that they were present in that situation.
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible. So, I mean, you're out there, you're having a good time, you're not expecting anything to happen, and then all of a sudden it's like disaster strikes, and you responded right away. Tell us a little bit about what was going through your mind when that was happening. When the girl started pointing and screaming, were you afraid? Did you have any hesitancy, or did you just know, hey, someone needs my help, I'm just going to do this?
So let's break that down into a couple different questions. The first one being, was I afraid? Anytime I'm in the ocean, I definitely have the respect for the ocean itself to know I have to be aware. I have to be aware that this is something greater than me. This is something way more powerful than I will ever be. And so there is a level of respect and healthy fear there. There's a level of awareness that has to be present. That's part of why when I saw them coming up and I saw them, especially that close to the pier, I kept an eye out on them so much. But once that call to action essentially came, did I hesitate? No. In my mind, I already had made up. I saw them there. I already had that worry. So I was already thinking if something does happen, I'm going. And at this time, I was a senior in high school. I was thinking that I'm invincible, the typical young young male syndrome. So that was also probably at play, I will be honest. Um, but no, if something's happening like that, I know that I needed to take action. So I did not hesitate at that point. Once I realized what was happening, I just moved and I did what I knew how to do. Also, like an important thing to note, I was um, I was never a lifeguard, but I was on multiple different swim teams and such. So that training kind of just, it was muscle memory at that point. Once you do something enough, it's just you go, you do it, you don't really think. So yeah, that's part of why I think I don't remember the details so much as just see it, do it, get out.
Absolutely. And I'm so grateful that you were successful, in your endeavor. Let's talk a little bit about, what can our listeners do? What we do on the show primarily is we try to give people advice and some skills and some tactics on, okay, well, if this does happen to you, what are you going to do about it? So what would you, tell our audience? Let's say they don't have any training whatsoever. Is there any training courses you would recommend to them to take, or is there anything that you would maybe suggest, hey, maybe you should start doing this or doing that just in case?
Yeah, so specifically, we're talking about the ocean. So a couple things come to mind. One is almost always if there's, high tide, some strong currents, anything like that, lifeguards will put up signs, they'll put up flags, familiarize yourself with that, learn how to read that, see what the other people that are locals there are doing, read those context clues, use what's around you. Another thing, if it's just a nice clear day and you're just having fun, nothing overtly dangerous or anything like that, the first thing that I mentioned, where you have a place on land that you is one of your focal points, so you can see, you can gauge where you are, and then have something, especially if you have a pier, use that as another focal point, so you can kind of use both of those to see how far in the ocean you are, and then how far away from that first point you're going, either away from the pier, away from your original location, so you can guide yourself. That is definitely something that you want to know. You want to know where you're at all times. It's so easy to be swept away pretty dang quickly if you're not paying attention. As far as courses, definitely take some first aid courses. I know there's a lot of things that are offered in the communities. I'm not sure about specifically ones directed towards the ocean. I'm sure there are, but we could get familiarized with those and maybe put some links in the description as well. Off the top of my head, I cannot think of any just because I'm no longer living near the ocean. So unfortunately, I don't have that knowledge on hand, and I do apologize for that.
Yeah, that's no problem. That's something that will definitely be included. Some of the things that I personally would recommend, and this is just from my experience, just like Eddie was talking about, a CPR is an absolute must. I think this is important for whether you're in the ocean, if you're on a hike, whatever the situation is, wherever you're at. CPR and first aid, it almost in the day and age now has become mandatory. Um, if you guys listened to the last episode, I talked about active shooters, and I mean, active shooters have just become completely normalized. I mean, it happens all the time now. It's not even a matter of, hey, this could happen. No, it's going to happen. You just got to make sure that you're prepared for it. But I would recommend CPR class, absolutely. Regarding ocean specifics, one thing that I would personally recommend is to get professionally trained by a PADI instructor or a PADI dive school, which is the Professional Divers Association. And through them, they offer multiple courses. You can do open water, advanced open water. You can do rescue diver. And those are just some basic courses. They're very fun. They're super easy to understand, super easy to learn. And that way you just have a little bit more, credentials basically on your resume. But more importantly, okay, you've been through a course. Now you know how to handle a situation if someone is drowning. You at least have that knowledge to help back you up. So those courses will be absolutely put in the description. So Eddie, that was a wonderful story. Thanks for sharing that. And hey, you saved a life out of it. That kid, who knows, he may create the cure for cancer. So good on you, man.
Appreciate it, man. And I will not take more credit than I'm due. I just helped out a little bit. The lifeguards on duty were the ones that did the majority there. So I'm thankful for them. Thankful for all those first responders and such that are listening to this as well, especially during these times.
So let's go ahead and pull away from the ocean a little bit here. This episode is encompassing all adventures. So we're talking hiking, we're talking, if you want to throw into the mix, skydiving, going out in the ocean, doing some nighttime kind of stuff. So let's talk about an adventure kit for our listeners and helping them determine the best items to take with them based on their adventure. So this is going to be an all-inclusive adventure kit.
So a couple things come to mind there as well. The number one thing that I think about when I'm thinking about a kit is definitely some sort of water. You want to make sure that you have that on hand. Personally, I have a CamelBak that I take with me, especially if I'm going on a longer hike. I also found it's this powdered electrolyte mix that I like to put in there. Gives it some flavor and, again, just to refuel, replenish. If you're moving and going out a long distance, you definitely want to have something like that to help you out. On that same train of thought, you want to talk about fuel, like energy bars, trail mix. Sometimes I'll take some fruit, like an apple. I tend to have an apple just towards the beginning. I don't know what it is about those, but they help me to just curb my hunger for quite a while. So I tend to have that as well. And I've also been using this trail called All Trail, or this app called All Trails, excuse me. It's free on the App Store, and it's something that it's a whole community. It's very, very helpful if you're looking for new trails to go explore, new campgrounds, anything like that. There's a bunch of people that use it. They constantly leave comments letting you know, hey, there's, ice on this area, there's construction over here, this is a great trail this time of year, or if it's not, they'll let you know that as well. It's incredibly helpful. It'll also tie into something like Google Maps, where you can, I don't know why I didn't know about this before, but something I found later this year was actually that in Google Maps, you can download a specific area. So something I've started doing is that if I know I'm going to go explore a new trail, a new area, I'm just going to go hiking for half the day, the whole day, whatever it is, I will download that whole spec on my Google Maps so that if at any point I get lost, if at any point I just want to double check out I am where I think I am, I can pull that up and it's on my phone, it's good to go, it's already loaded, I don't have to have service. It's extremely helpful.
That's a really fantastic piece of advice, guys. Absolutely. What he's talking about, it can definitely save your life. A lot of people nowadays, they rely on their phones, and as soon as the internet goes away, they don't know what to do. And let's be honest, a lot of people don't know how to read actual maps. So when you're able to download the map and pull it up on your phone right away, you don't need the internet, you don't need any kind of connection. It's just a really safe bet for you to do. Even if you know where you're going, you've been there 1,000 times, it's always a good idea because you don't know who could use that map. So just want to put that out there, but that's fantastic.
Absolutely. Seriously, once I learned that, I've used it every single time I go to a new spot, and most times that I'm exploring places that I'm somewhat familiar with, but still not completely, it has helped tremendously. So definitely do encourage that. I also personally tend to take a portable battery. I have one. It's $20 at Walmart, guys. Seriously, again, if you're downloading that map on your phone or if you have a physical map, that helps out as well. But your phone is so helpful. It's communication to the outside world. It's a flashlight. It's so much. So, I'm not saying be overly reliant on it, but you have the technology. It's 21st century. Use what you've got.
Exactly. And there's a lot of guys out there who want to say, oh, you don't need technology. You should be able to use a compass and use a map. And, I agree to an extent. I think it's important to learn how to use a lot of the basic skills, but you're right. It is the modern day and age. It's 2020, going on 2021. Why not? Your phone does everything. Like you were saying, it's your communication, it's your maps, it's your calculator, it's your compass, it's everything you could possibly need. It's phone numbers, it's contacts. I mean,
Absolutely. I mean, they even have, I'm pretty sure they have, I'm 99% sure I've seen it. I'm pretty sure they have this app where they could even map out the constellations to help you figure out where you're at and see all these cool things in the sky. So, I mean, it's a great learning tool too, don't overly rely on it, but use it as a tool. It is a tool.
yeah, it is a tool exactly. And guess what? If your tool breaks, you got to figure out another way to do it.
Exactly. That's a perfect transition, actually, because the next one on my list person was going to be an actual physical map and compass. So I have a good friend of mine who gifted me for this last Christmas this parkour bracelet that has a compass on it. It has a couple like just multifunctional tools on it. It's incredibly helpful. And then just having a map on hand as well, knowing how to navigate it, knowing where you're at, using or gauging where landmarks are as you're going out so that you can remember them when you're coming back. All extremely helpful. All very, very, very helpful.
I 100%. I'll throw in just a quick story real fast. I'm not going to take up too much of your guys' time, but I have a very similar. It's a little paracord bracelet. It has a compass on there. It has a built-in hidden knife. It's got some flint. That thing, I carry that with me everywhere I go. Doesn't matter if it's a trip to the grocery store or I'm out on a really intense, 12, 14-mile hike. That thing has saved my life so many times. And guys, it's like $8 on it's just a generic paracord bracelet. You can buy them on Etsy. You can buy them, just whatever. They're manufactured in China. But I'll tell you real quick the story. I was actually coming back. I was overseas. I had my brother-in-law and my wife in the car. We were driving back from London Heathrow Airport, and all of a sudden, my muffler on the vehicle I was driving just fell off. It fell off and it just started dragging along the road. So I pulled over real quick, and it was bad. So I didn't have anything. I didn't have any tools on me. The only thing I had was this paracord bracelet. So using the bracelet, I used the knife that was built in, cut the paracord. I think it was about 300 feet of rope, or paracord, I should say. Paracorded that muffler to the car. Did such a good job. Go to find out 2 years later, that muffler was still on the vehicle and it hadn't even moved. So that was just one situation. I got a few of them, but yeah, a paracord bracelet, guys, is absolutely essential. It's a fire starter. It can tie things up. You name it. And then the one I currently have, it's got, like I said, knife and flint. But yeah, it's a very good piece of kit to carry on you.
Absolutely. And we will definitely add that in the description as well. Like you said, it's easy to have on you 24/7. I also have mine on all the time. Before we keep going down that road, though, I will backtrack just a little bit and say another key thing to have with you is just sunscreen. Just do it. It takes 2 seconds. Use it. I don't want to have to deal with that damage down the road. I know we're fine right now, but just think long term. But now, continuing down that road, though, also I added here a light or a headlight, especially with the winter months here upon us. It gets dark really quickly. You could overlook some sort of cliff, branch, something you trip on, whatever it is. having a headlight, having a light, just in general helps you. Hopefully, you're already almost back, or you're near wherever you're staying for the night. But that definitely does help you tremendously, and it barely takes up any space. Also, $5-10 on Walmart, Amazon, Etsy, whatever it is. The last thing I have listed here, and this is just generic, but this is essentially just proper wear for whatever the season is. I'm currently living in Colorado. Winter months gets very, very cold. If I'm going out during those winter months, I'm definitely packing, boots for the snow. I'm packing winter jackets. I'm wearing a thermal, gloves, face covering, long warm socks, things like that. You want to wear clothes for that specific area, for that specific weather. If you're out when it's, sunny in California, you're not going to have any of that. You're going to have layers for sure, because you want to just have something, extra just in case, but maybe some compression shorts, some tank top, extra change of clothes there in your bag just in case that gets wet, whatever the case may be. If you're near water, have some waterproof bag. Also, pro tip, if you're trying to save money, like I did, especially as the first couple of years that I was on my own, Ziploc bag works really well to save your electronics from water, and it's incredibly cheap. Just so you know. Living out in California, then Hawaii for a little while, I definitely used the Ziploc bag every single time I went hiking, and it saved me from having to replace my phone, replace friends' electronics, speakers, things like that. It's a tiny little investment, but it goes a long way. So shout out to whoever created Ziploc bags. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good piece of kit to have on you, and we're going to talk about it in our survival section here. But Ziploc bag, it can have many uses. So that's all I'll say. I'll say that for the next bit. Anything else?
For right now, I would say that is it. Oh, actually, sorry, one last thing. For you pet owners, anybody that takes dogs or whatever it might be with you, food, water, bowl, treats, harness, leash, baggies, you know what you got to do with that. Do your part. And then just, again, be aware of the weather and whatever your uh, pet's temperament is for that specific kind of weather. That's the last thing I'll say on that.
Yeah, that's all excellent stuff. Guys, really pay attention. I know a lot of you probably think this is all common knowledge, and it is, but it's always good to have someone speak on your behalf and actually list it out for you. Some things I just want to mention real quick. Again, that was a great list, Eddie. Some gloves. Having a pair of gloves on you will save your hands. I can't tell you how many times I've come across something where I've had to push some hard brush or some thorny plants out of the way. You can use them for ropes, for climbing, anything like that. So save your hands. Get some gloves. Also, another essential item: just have a little medical kit on you. You don't have to have extensive medical training. You don't have to be an EMT or a paramedic. You don't even have to go through the CPR class. I recommend it, but just have a little boo-boo kit on you. Just have some basic Band-Aids, some isoprep wipes, just some basic stuff to stop the bleeding and just kind of get you on your way there. There's nothing worse than getting a wound infected and then have to continue your journey on with swamp water in your cut or whatever. So other than that, yeah, I think everything else you pretty much hit spot on. Layers is important. Make sure you have hats. If it's hot, you can cover the sun. If it's cold, it keeps you warm. Remember, you lose heat the fastest through your head and through your feet. So as long as your feet and your head are nice and toasty, there's a good chance you'll be fine, no matter what the conditions are. Other than that, I think that's it. So, that was a really, really good list, Eddie. I appreciate that. So with that being said, guys, we're going to go ahead and just take a brief break here. And now a message from our sponsor. Welcome back, folks, to the Dozer Tactical Podcast. I'm joined today by special guest Eddie Moreida, and we just finished going over his first-hand account of his life-saving encounter, as well as how to build your own adventure kit. And we went over some of the details about how to use those items and their purpose. Okay, Eddie. So finally, let's talk about some more in-depth first aid, some common problems when you're out and about, and some tactics to survive if you're ever lost or stranded while you're out exploring.
I mean, here's where I was going to add that about carrying a basic first aid kit with you. It's simple, it's cheap, it's available anywhere. Antiseptic wipes, antibacterials, gauze, ibuprofen, um, you know, band-aids, tweezers, things like that. You can have some splints as well, some different kind of wrap. Um, but then from there, when we're talking about like the survival tactics and stuff, I mean, what comes to my mind is essentially just knowing where you are, using those tools, the maps, things like that. But I think what comes to your mind is a bag over a plant to get some water.
So, so just to give you guys a little bit of context, we were talking about this offline, and Eddie seemed pretty impressed by that little fact. Just to kind of explain that to you guys. So, one of the survival tactics, and again, this is extreme, guys. This is extreme kind of stuff here. This is, you're out hiking, you get lost, you don't know, your phone dies, your compass is broken, or you don't have a compass. It's nighttime, you don't know where you're at. And believe it or not, this has happened to me quite a few times. So we'll talk about that maybe a little bit later. But if you need water, because you need water to survive, take that Ziploc bag that we told you to pack, and believe it or not, put it over a plant, tie it up really good. And this is, again, for extreme circumstances. You're at this location for days waiting for a search and rescue team to come get you. But if you have the bag over the plant, the sun will actually be hitting the plant. It's going to cause evaporation, and that's going to cause water to actually build up in that Ziploc bag or whatever plastic bag you have on you. So with that being said, you now have water in your bag. Now, it's not going to be a liter. You're not going to be able to throw a plastic bag over a plant and expect a gallon of water to just miraculously appear. But you will have enough water in there so you can drink that. And thankfully with plants, they don't stop. So you can keep doing that on multiple plants if you have multiple bags. And that way you can always have a source of water on you. So that's just one little quick tip. But Eddie, do you have anything else in terms of navigation? I know we talked a bit about a compass, but do you have anything that you could tell our audience about as far as, kind of landmarks? And I think you briefly touched on it when you were talking about the beach, having like a focal point, a land focal point.
Right. So, again, going back specifically to the beach, I usually use two focal points if I can. One is on land, just so I know how far left and right I'm going off there. And then one is if there's some sort of pier, some formation out in the distance of rocks, something to gauge how deep in the ocean I'm going, because currents will drag you out there really easily. And it's so, I actually had a friend that we were out surfing and body surfing at that point, actually. And she got pulled out way too far and she was exhausted. Another tip right there is if you are ever tired out in the ocean, you have to swim back, you're trying to get past the shore break, rest on your back for a little bit, catch your breath. You don't have to keep paddling as much. You can catch your breath, you can rest for a little bit. If we're talking currents, you don't want to swim against a current, you want to swim kind of diagonally towards the land because you're just going to tire yourself out. That current's going to win. Or if you can, swim around. And then going back to the focal points, sorry for that. Going back to the focal points though, yeah, definitely want to have some place that you're looking at towards land so you know where you are. And again, something to gauge how far out in the ocean you are. You'll learn with time, become more aware, but know your limits.
Absolutely. One thing I did want to bring up, and we probably should backpedal this a little bit. So this is, you're out you're out in the wilderness, or you're stranded out in the ocean. But the first and foremost thing that you really need to do, and again, I touched this on my previous episode, the first thing you have to do is you have to call for help. You got to call 911. You got to, let people know that are next to you. If they're close enough, or you're drowning, whatever the situation is. This is about survival, so you're just trying to basically sustain your life at this point. But whatever the situation is, wherever you're at, call for help, call 911, send off a flare, make some noise, do what you can to try to get some attention. If there's absolutely no one around you and you're in a situation where you're just stuck, that's when you're going to start using these tactics. But just, I should have said that in the beginning, but yeah, try to call for help first and foremost, because that is going to be the easiest way to get out of your situation. You're not going to have to go through and eat animals and hunt and do all this stuff by yourself if you can have help come get you. So just try to keep that in mind. Another thing I wanted to touch on about the landmarks is, you're right, it does come with time. It's just a matter of trying to be situationally aware, and when you're out and about, just kind of make a mental note. Hey, this rock is substantially bigger and pointier than the rest of the rocks that are around here. Hey, this tree is kind of deformed and curved a little bit, so I'm going to remember this. That way you just always have a mental indicator, a little landmark, if you will. So, if you pass by that same area multiple times, you know where you're at roughly. And it doesn't matter where you're at. Even if you're in the ocean, you can still point out a cloud above your head. You can point out a boat maybe nearby, a lighthouse, something to give you some kind of indicator as to where you're at. Eddie, let's talk about, you brought this up, the knife. What are some other things that you can do with the knife? So we talked about the basics, you can cut rope, that kind of stuff, but what else can you do, and why is it such an important survival tool? Not only a survival tool, but just an everyday tool.
I mean, I have a knife that I carry on me 24/7, so I've used it for everything as simple as, opening up a package at home to cutting rope to what I need it for. Shoot, if you're really in that, survival situation, for defense, for attacking, for skinning an animal, I mean, there's endless uses for it. You can make a spear. You can, ooh, I don't know. Help me out here, because I can't even think of all the things that you can do with a knife. It's incredibly versatile.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of hard. I didn't mean to really put you on the spot there. It's just a knife is a multi-tool. I know people carry multi-tools on them, and if you do, that's fantastic. I personally don't. It's too big and bulky. But a knife has always served all my purposes. It can be used for self-defense as long as you're trained. If you've never been in any kind of combative training or have ever had proper techniques shown to you about how to fight someone with a knife, don't do it, because you're going to lose your life that way. I'm just putting that out there. But you can use it as a self-defense weapon if you need to. You can use it as like a pry bar. I know there's a lot of knife guys out there that are going to hate me for this, but look, in a life or death situation, it can be a fantastic pry bar. You can use it to hunt. You can use it to skin. You can use it to, again, cut through anything, cardboard boxes, rope, cut shirts open. It can be used as scissors. So if you have someone who maybe has a gunshot wound or a stab wound, you can use that knife to kind of cut the leg, the pant leg, or the shirt, opening, so you can get to that. Put on a cat tourniquet. It's a great tool to have. I always carry one as well. It's just kind of a standard, really. So another thing I wanted to bring up to you guys when we were talking about creating your kit. So I talked about having a boo-boo kit, and a boo-boo kit is supposed to just be a lot of the basic, first aid, Band-Aids, that kind of stuff, Neosporin, Care Bear, all that kind of stuff. But another thing I really should have mentioned, and I'm going to include it in this survival section here because this kind of is more survival, is a cat tourniquet, which is if you guys don't know, it is the Committee of Tactical Combat Casualty Care, or TCCC. Now that's more kind of for your military guys, but basically it is an approved tourniquet. It's going to stop the bleed. Again, I talked about this in the last episode, but it's always a good idea to have a tourniquet on you, because if you're bleeding profusely and you can't stop it with direct pressure, you throw on the tourniquet and that'll stop it. It never hurts to have a tourniquet for yourself or for someone else, especially in a survival situation. If you're out stranded for a few days, you could easily sustain some wounds and you need to get treated. So just carry one on you. You can also use it as like a pressure bandage, or you can use it to hold some stuff together as well. So With that being said, a lot of survival tactics, it just comes down to being crafty, being resourceful, using what's around you to get the job done. And remember, the job here is you're trying to preserve your life long enough until search and rescue can come get you, or you can get transported to your nearest hospital or, wherever you're trying to go. All right, Eddie. So, we talked a bit about some of the basics. Let's get into some more about first aid, how to perform these actions. We're going to go over, CPR, CAT tourniquet placement, all that kind of stuff. But I believe you were certified in CPR and you took the course, correct? So let's have you just kind of go over the process and the steps and just kind of give us a refresher. For those of you that have not taken the course, I highly advise you just go take it. It's really easy. It's not too expensive. Again, this is just kind of a refresher for everyone, just so it stays on your mind.
Absolutely. And actually, just a note right there. Sometimes your employer might actually pay for the course, so you can also double check that. Going into refresher for CPR, if someone is on the ground, they're not responding, make sure that somebody is contacting 911. We're calling for the professionals to arrive on scene as soon as possible. If they are not responding, if the person on the floor is not responding, check their airways, make sure there's nothing obstructing it. If there is nothing obstructing it, you can begin chest compressions. Right now, the standard is 30 compressions and then 2 breaths, and repeat until help arrives. And the way that you're going to perform these compressions is you want to have one hand on top of the other, interlacing your fingers or interlocking your fingers. Put your palm, the bottom palm, on the person's chest right at their sternum, just about their sternum, and then you're going to perform those 30 compressions. Again, 2 breaths. You want to do this. One tip that I actually learned was use the Staying Alive song, that beat, the yes, Staying Alive. Use that to time your 30 compressions, and that should be essentially ideal for that action.
Yeah, I think you said that pretty well, and that's all there is to it. So they're not breathing, they're not responding. Get to it. And don't stop. That's one thing I will say. Don't stop. Don't do it. You get tired, and then you go, oh, you know what? I've been doing it for about 20 minutes. They should be good. No, because they can die right there. You have to keep doing it until professional medical help arrives, or someone who's qualified to take over comes over. Another little quick thing we're going to go over real fast is just tourniquets. I've been talking about them. A lot of people, they want to believe that they, know how to use a tourniquet, or they would learn how to improvise one. But it's always good to just kind of give a refresher and just kind of help people, give them the knowledge. So we're going to be talking about the basic CAT tourniquet. It's your standard tourniquet that has, the little stick. You turn it around, it tightens up, and then you Velcro it to further tighten it down. Basically, how you use those and why you should use those. If you are sustained a significant injury and you're bleeding profusely and it's not stopping with direct pressure, if you've got an injury on your arm, you're putting your arm above your heart, you're putting on pressure, it's still not stopping, that would be the time for a tourniquet. Tourniquet should also be used for gunshot wounds, knife wounds. If an animal attacks you and you're profusely bleeding, that's another good time to do it. A real quick refresher, you're going to take the tourniquet, you're going to place it 1 to 2 inches above the bleeding point. Make sure not to put it on elbows or knees. You're going to cinch that down as tight as you can using your Velcro strap. From that point, you're going to take the stick. I don't even remember the terminology for it. Basically, you're going to keep tightening that down until it's really, really tight. Now, it's going to hurt, but remember, you're trying to survive. You're not trying to make someone feel comfortable for yourself or for somebody else. So you're going to take the leverage stick, tighten it down all the way, cinch it down until the blood stops. If it still does not stop, now try applying direct pressure to the wound and keeping the wound above the heart. If it's still not stopping and it's that bad, you need to put on a second tourniquet. That will stop the bleeding. And if you mess up or you don't think it's tight enough, under no circumstances should you ever undo it or untighten it. You can continue to tighten it, but don't ever undo it. That needs to be done by a medical professional at the hospital. and just make sure that they are also aware, whoever you're transporting the patient to, or if it's yourself, that the medical professionals know, the EMTs, first responders, whoever is there, that they know there's a tourniquet on you. So just point it out to them, let them know, mark it, or if it's yourself, just tell them, hey, I got a tourniquet on my arm. I got attacked by a wolf. I was doing some crazy stuff. Help me out here. So that's not an extensive course. Again, I really recommend taking the Stop the Bleed course put on by the DoD. Take some kind of medical training, go through EMT, all that kind of stuff. But we're just trying to give you guys a refresher just to help you out here. So if you're out hiking and you're hearing this podcast, maybe we can get you thinking about some things. So on your next adventure, you can prepare a little bit more adequately. All right. Well, I believe that is all the time we have for today. Eddie, thank you so much for being here on the Dozer Tactical Podcast. And when we were talking offline, you also said that this was your first podcast appearance. So I am so glad that you were here on my podcast. I got to have you on here first before you go on to many other podcasts and events. Do you have anything else that you'd like to say to our audience?
Well, thank you again for having me. And actually, yes, I know right now with this whole pandemic that's happening, a lot of people have unfortunately been without a job and have been struggling. I have been fortunate enough to work for a company where we have a lot of different positions available worldwide. If you are struggling, if you're looking for a job, I work for DaVita. It's a healthcare company. They have multiple different positions. It's not just clinical healthcare. They have everything from, administrative, on the corporate side, insurance counseling. I mean, you name it. It's a huge company. They've got it. So if you need an in there, just reach out. Let me know, and I can put in a word there. So we'll get you in for an interview or something. Want to make sure that we're helping out those around us. And you can reach me on Instagram. Instagram handle is Eddie Moreida. It's EDDIEMOREIDA. Even if you're a stranger, I would just want to make sure that we're doing all our parts here. So definitely don't hesitate to reach out.
And guys, don't worry, the links to his company will be in the show description as well. So if you want to go ahead and reach out or you need that assistance, the link will be down there for you guys. So just click that link and you'll be set up through his company.
Please remember to leave us a review and give us a rating on your preferred podcast platform. Also, please consider supporting the Dozer Tactical Podcast with a monthly donation by selecting the link in the show description.
Thank you for listening, and tune in next week for more tactical stories and advice. Stay safe and stay prepared. Eddie, thanks again.